So, welcome back to the self-esteem and confidence mindset with me, Johnny Pardo. Today, I have a special episode, different from my usual ones, and I've got a guest on the show today to talk about sleep and the effects of sleep on your self-esteem. Today, it's a new topic to me, which I'd like to, which is always fascinating to learn about. And I've got more of an expert than me on the subject, so that should be beneficial. So today I've got Lauren Duffell on with me, and she is a sleep coach who's currently located in Costa Rica. Lauren is helping insomniacs reduce their stress and anxiety to sleep better and perform better, hitting their potential in life. So welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much, Johnny. It's really fun and an honor to be on your podcast and addressing your audience. I love speaking to new audiences about sleep because it's not a topic that is common knowledge in many circles. And many people think, you either don't think about sleep when you sleep well, or you think that you know how to sleep well because you sleep well. But until you have a problem with sleeping, you realize it's a whole area that's can be quite mysterious or can feel quite mysterious.
Yeah, totally. I'm probably going to learn a few things today from what you're saying. And then be kicking myself for it. But hopefully my sleep's getting better anyway. But it's always useful to learn things from different people. So yeah, thank you very much for coming on today. So Lauren, I gave you a sort of a brief introduction, and just to sort of viewers, me and Lauren know each other from a personal development group that we're in together on looking at expanding our businesses. But Lauren, if you would just like to say a little bit about your story and what you do at the moment for the listeners, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I'll start with my story a little bit, and that is that I used to work in hospitality. I used to work in hotels and event management and restaurants. And that lifestyle was a lot of fun, did a lot of drinking alcohol, did a lot of partying, did a lot of staying up late. And then I remember a specific day where I was very stressed out. My job was fairly stressful, and I also didn't manage my stress very well on top of that. And I remember one day I was feeling really stressed, and I felt as if like a zap went through my head. I felt like something in my head broke. And I don't think anything actually did in hindsight, but in that moment, I felt like, whoa, something is wrong with me right now because of this stress in my life. And around that time, I had started to have some strange health problems. My sleep had started becoming very difficult. I wasn't able to fall asleep for a very, very long time, sometimes not the whole night. And I was starting to lose control of my emotions. I was starting to get really bad memory. I couldn't remember if I had done something at work or not, or someone would say, "Did you finish this project?" And I honestly couldn't answer them. I would have to go into our system and look myself as if I was a stranger to see if I had finished it. And it was at that moment when I was looking up one of the events to see if I'd finished it, where I thought, okay, there's really something off here. And I had gone to my doctor and I had talked to her about my sleep, and I was on a sleeping medication, which wasn't, I can say it sometimes helped put me to sleep, but I felt more like I was passed out than sleeping. And I could still sometimes take that medication and still not sleep. And the combination of not sleeping plus taking the medication made me feel even more horrible the next day than if I had just gone a normal night without sleep. So essentially, I started to listen to my body, and for the first time in my life, and maybe connecting with my soul for the first time in my life. before that, you know, I went to university, then I got the job and the boyfriend and moved in with him and all these things, which I thought I was happy about, but in hindsight, I was doing all these things because I thought I was supposed to. And then listening to my body, I started on this journey towards healing my current condition, which was a combination of things, including the insomnia. And to be honest, it took me 5 years to overcome my own insomnia. And in that time, I did a lot of research. I changed careers. I went back to school for nutrition. I did a lot of traveling. I went and hung out in yoga communities and explored different kinds of alternative healing. I had a Chinese medicine practitioner for a while helping me with my sleep. I went to cognitive behavioral therapy to help me with my sleep. And eventually, when I finally healed from it, it was really a combination of a lot of life changes for me, because I could see in hindsight that I was way off of what my body, mind, and soul wanted. My life was way off that track. So then, after going back to school for nutrition, I was working in a clinic helping people with their nutrition, working with clients one-on-one. But the funny thing about that was that people would come in and ask me about their sleep, or people would come into our supplement store, which I was one of the assistant managers of the supplement store as well. And every day people would come in saying, what kind of supplement should I take for sleep? And there is never a real answer for that, because sure, you can take something and yes, it might help you sleep sometimes, whether that's a supplement or whether that's a medication, but taking something is always a Band-Aid solution. So, or even people are into CBD oil now, or sometimes using marijuana or whatever else somebody does to help themselves fall asleep. It's all Band-Aid. So then talking with the clinic director, they agreed to have me start counseling people for their sleep. And that kind of took my career in a whole different direction than I ever saw it going, because even with seeing people for just a few visits, I didn't have a package at the time. People would just book in with the clinic. And seeing people for just a few visits made a big difference. So then I thought, okay, I'm able to do this and I'm helping people. And I'm realizing that these things I've learned about sleep along the way are not obvious. And I could still bring my nutrition knowledge into that, because with the nutrition, there are nutritional aspects that affect our sleep and our overall health. And even with nutrition, there was an aspect of sort of life coaching that came along with it, because you're getting people to change their habits. You're also looking at their physical activity. So adding in the sleep was just a natural transition for me at the time. Yeah, now I feel like it's my life purpose.
Certainly, that's an interesting journey of how you went from finishing university, going into working in sort of hotels, getting into, and then sort of making that lifestyle change, getting into the nutrition side before getting more into the sleeping side of things, and that's kind of how you come on for there. So yeah, it's an interesting journey. It's always interesting to hear how people end up in certain professions. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. One
Thank
thing,
you.
yeah. So one thing I was going to just ask you is just kind of touch on a little bit what you talked about, and you talked about
Mm.
the pills, or the medication rather, being the Band-Aid for, is more of a sort of Band-Aid for sleep issues. Is it a lot to
Yes.
do with your mindset? Would you say you need to look at more closely than kind of other sort of, your mindset, would you say, is the most important factor to sort of looking at your sleep issues?
Mindset is one of the most important factors, because when you're solving your own sleep issues, honestly, there is no magic formula. There is the sleep hygiene, the sleep science, learning about what affects the hormones in the body, and those things can make a big difference, but it's never one thing. It's always a combination of those practical science-based techniques and your own internal journey. There's some kind of anxiety or suffering or disconnect. Um, Disconnect meaning there's something in your life that you're doing that is not meant for you, or there's something in your life that you're getting too much of, and or something else that you're getting not enough of. And that can be nutrients, that can be sometimes sunlight, that can be emotions. And so definitely in the healing process for overcoming insomnia, there will be a lot of changes that have to be made, and there will be some trial and error in trying new things. And that's because overcoming insomnia is overcoming a type of trauma. So it's going to be an individual journey, but it's also guided in the base of psychology and sleep science. But I like to feel that the individual is the artist in their own sleep journey, and what guides that artistry is really listening to what's inside. So mindset can be really important when you're on a healing journey and you're coming up against things that you've tried that aren't working, or bad advice that you're given, or you go to your doctor and you feel like they don't help you. You need that positive, forward thinking mindset to see that even on those days where you feel like you've really tried everything and nothing's working, that you haven't actually tried everything, and that some things might be working, but that if you're only doing one thing that's pushing your sleep towards better sleep, it might not be enough. And that's why it's always a combination of mental, physical, and spiritual as well. It can be a spiritual journey overcoming your insomnia. I spent, as part of I remember this moment in my own journey where one of my health challenges and one of the things that was keeping me awake at night, aside from thoughts and stress, was that physically my heart would beat really hard, like out of my chest at nighttime. And I had been to different doctors. They'd measure my thyroid. They measure all the things they're supposed to measure for that symptom, and nothing was helping. And I did a yoga class, and I'm lying on the ground in savasana at the end, and everybody's relaxing. Some people are falling asleep, and I'm lying there crying and frustrated because I'm supposed to, in quotation marks, be relaxing at the end of this class. But whenever I tried to relax, my heart would start beating and my whole body is moving because my heart is beating. And I felt like I surrendered to God in that moment. It was like, okay, what do I need to do to make this stop? I will do anything. I will do absolutely anything to make this stop. And so it kind of became this life quest to fix my sleep and heal this irregular heartbeat. And that I look at that from both scientific and spiritual perspectives, because they play into each other for sure. And I can talk a little bit more about the specifics of how our thoughts and feelings play into the science of our own body chemistry as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally relate to just going back to being in yoga class and being hacked off that I wasn't relaxing as much as everyone else. Definitely being that and then punching the mat. Sorry. But yeah, I suppose there's a combination of, well, there is a combination of factors, and it's going to be different for every individual. There's no kind of one solution. This is why you're not sleeping. I mean, I remember I was working with a guy in one of my previous jobs, and he would have about 6 cups of coffee a day, and or well, claimed he slept fine anyway, and he seemed to like he did. No kind of like stress or anything. Whilst if I had a cup of coffee past midday, I'd struggle to sleep because physically that's different for me than him.
Hmm.
So again, it's going to be different factors for different individuals. So that's certainly interesting how you said it, and it sounds like for you there was a number of things in yourself that kind of contributed on your sort of earlier days when you were struggling to sleep.
Yeah, there were a number of things. For me, I would say, if I had to sum it up, I would say I was unhappy with my life. I didn't like my job. I was uncertain about my relationship. Um, I felt like, um, I guess I felt afraid to do what I really wanted to do with my life. And then there were physical problems coming up due to lack of self-care. And my friends would all be surprised by that because they all thought that I did so much self-care. I like always look fit and I do yoga and I eat vegetables. But also I was eating things that made me feel pretty sick on a regular basis. Now, there are certain foods that I avoid because I react to them right away, but I didn't know that at the time, and I was eating them all the time. And also, at that point in my life, I was still having stimulants like regular teas and coffees and chocolates, which were affecting me a lot more than I thought they were. I'd say I am probably even more sensitive than you are. If I have a coffee in the morning, even I won't sleep at night. So
Oh,
that's one thing I
really?
learned
Oh,
about myself. Yeah, and that's the liver. Everyone's going to be a little bit different in their metabolism of stimulants because the metabolism of stimulants comes from the liver. And if your liver is not metabolizing um, that substance efficiently, then it will stay in your body longer. Simple as that. It's going to keep going through circulation. And with, did you want me to talk about stimulants a little bit? Because I feel like that's a common occurrence in many people's lives.
yeah, no, that would be quite good actually, tying into the next area I was potentially going to move on to, which was around the effects of physical health. But that'd be quite useful if you could give listeners kind of an overview of stimulants onto that one.
Sure, yeah. So, stimulants found most commonly in coffee or energy drinks or some sodas, chocolate and teas. Those, as I said, have to be metabolized by the liver. And when you look at the average science, it takes someone on average about 5 hours to clear half of the substance. So we would say that caffeine has a half-life of 5 hours for most people. And that means that if you have a cup of coffee and it has about 100 milligrams of caffeine in it, we'll just use that for an easy example, then 5 hours later, there's still 50 milligrams of caffeine in your body. 5 hours after that, still 25. 5 hours after that, still 12. So you only felt the awake effect from that caffeine for maybe a couple hours after you drank it. And that's because when you have the coffee and the stimulant gets into your blood, it prompts your body to release cortisol. So you get like an artificial little stress response that comes from it. But the cortisol will go back down to normal after a few hours. And what doesn't go back to normal after a few hours is that adenosine, which is, I try to explain this in a nutshell. If you remember science class from grade 12 or grade 11, you had to learn that the energy molecule in the body is called ATP, or adenosine triphosphate.
Oh, yeah.
And basically, you don't need to remember that or anything, but basically, as you move about your day, your body uses energy and breaks these molecules, and adenosine collects in little receptors around your body, around your nervous system, around your organs. And all you need to know is that when when all the adenosine receptors are full of adenosine, then you feel sleepy and your body needs rest, and your body will pull the mind into sleep. But the tricky part with that caffeine lingering in your body so long is that the caffeine fits perfectly into those adenosine receptors and blocks adenosine. So that is how, even though you don't feel stimulated by the coffee anymore, if you had it, say, at midday, like for yourself, if you have it at midday, you can feel that you're not falling asleep as well at night. And that's because the adenosine is not able to get into the receptors because the caffeine is blocking it. So, and that will be pretty individual journey, and that's something that just listening to the body, you can feel it. For myself, I started when I started listening more closely to my body, I cut out coffee, I went to green tea. Then I realized, nope, green tea makes me feel that way too. Cut that out. And then a couple years later, I realized, shit, chocolate makes me feel this way too. So I'll say I don't never have chocolate, but I just minimize it a lot because I know there's a threshold there for me anyway. And I started sometimes having decaf lattes when I go to a cafe because I like coffee. I like how it tastes. I love the smell, all of that. So I would sometimes get a decaf latte. And one time, I can tell you that that was not decaf. And I stayed awake for 2 days, and it was horrible.
Oof, sorry.
Not everyone is that sensitive. I'd say there are very few people who are that sensitive, I think. But that was one of the most significant factors in my own journey with discovering what was affecting my sleep. So I think if you have caffeine in your system every day and you're not sleeping as well as you'd like to, there's always room for experimentation. And I'm never telling you what to do or telling you to not have caffeine anymore, but that it's always a cool learning experience to try cutting it down or taking a break and seeing how you feel. How things that might happen are that at first you feel more tired in the morning and you might get headaches for a couple days if you completely cut it out. But once your body gets used to not having that caffeine, the quality of your sleep can improve and then you don't need the caffeine. So what feels like a difficult situation that you're fixing using caffeine can be also resolved by taking a break from the caffeine, if that makes sense. Um, Other people or some people also find that their anxiety is better without the caffeine. And for some people, they find that caffeine from green tea doesn't give them as much anxiety as caffeine from coffee, for example, because every plant doesn't contain only one compound. And when we're talking about caffeine, we're talking about only one compound from that plant. So plants, Mother Nature is smarter than we'll ever be. And she has created a whole concoction of compounds in each plant, which also have effects on us. So that's one way that you can take a break from coffee if you don't want to entirely cut out the caffeine, is to try tea instead and see how that goes. And for me, that was the progression I went to, was like switching to different beverages, realizing I just feel my best when I have like chamomile or mint. And then I started getting really enthusiastic about herbal teas, like finding people who forage, who get like forage teas, or growing lemongrass here in Costa Rica and making tea out of that. And I find I can make really, really special teas that I feel really passionate and good about. So it's not like, wah wah, I have to have this shitty tea instead of having the coffee that I really want. I found a lot of pleasure and exploration in the whole world of herbal teas. So yeah, there's always new things to discover. So it's not taking something away, it's just trying something else instead.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose it's about self-awareness, a little bit about yourself and noticing how you feel after kind of certain drinks or when you take them away. Certainly, I've done that myself, and kind of when I've had coffee in the afternoon, I'm like, yeah, okay, that was caused from the coffee. Make a note of that. So that's really interesting what you're saying about the am I saying this correctly? The I'm terrible with words sometimes. E-diazine, the E-diazine, which blocks obviously the caffeine coming back in.
Yeah, it's adenosine.
Adenosine.
ADE. Yeah. Starting with an
Adenosine.
A.
Yeah, that blocks the
Yeah.
blocking the. So the caffeine's blocking the adenosine coming back in, and yeah, that makes so much sense because you're just wondering why you're lying awake, and I've had that myself, and it's going to be slightly maybe different for some people, but that could definitely be an impact on it. So that's a really good overview of the the stimulant, certainly on that one. Well, the next thing I
Yeah.
was just going to sort of touch on, which is really interesting, was what kind of, from your own experience, but also from people you've worked with, people you sort of guided and helped and coached, what are kind of some of the, just kind of a few of the physical symptoms from a lack of sleep that you've witnessed?
Yeah, physical symptoms, especially when the lack of sleep has gone on for a long time. Um, Often people have let go of certain aspects of their self-care because they feel they're too tired to do it. Like, I'm too tired to go to this exercise class, or to go to the gym, or to do a home workout, or to go outside and do something. So often there can be a loss of strength because the motivation to exercise is lower. And there's this whole hormonal change that happens when we don't get the sleep that is ideal for our bodies. Um, I like to explain this as if you picture, because these hormones have funny names, picture two like gremlins, and their names are leptin and ghrelin. And leptin tells your body when there is energy, and it prompts the thyroid to either use the energy or store the energy. So when we're not having the sleep that we need, there is leptin is lower. So your body feels that it has less energy, and this in turn has an effect on the thyroid, which then has an effect on the adrenal glands. So there's this whole cascade of hormonal changes that happen. The other thing that happens is that ghrelin, the other gremlin, ghrelin goes up when you don't get the sleep that you need. And ghrelin is a hunger hormone. So because your body didn't get energy from sleep, it's looking for another way to get energy. So ghrelin's going to go up, telling you to eat more. And so when someone hasn't been sleeping well, they often have a lot of cravings for carbohydrates, or just simply more hunger. But often the cravings go to those quick carbs that give you that jolt of energy, something sugary or something made of white flour. And that has its own hormonal impact, because having more sugars in the blood has an impact on insulin and can lead to diabetes, to type 2 diabetes. Can also lead to damage in the blood vessels when the blood sugar is too high on a consistent basis. And over a long period of time, if somebody has insomnia for many, many years, it can impact their risk of cardiovascular disease, just because of that. It could be partially the blood sugar, but also that when we're asleep, our body is healing and repairing any damaged tissues, and our really delicate tissues, like our blood vessels, they need to be repaired during our sleep. And when they're not getting repaired, then the incidence, or the chance of cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, or risk of stroke can go up. So that's where sleep can become really important when it's a long-term problem. But I don't like giving out too many scary statistics, to be honest, because when I was having my own sleep issues, all these scary statistics didn't help me sleep for sure. So, I would say when you're not sleeping well, you can feel that your body's being impacted. You can feel it. And that is enough for me, just feeling that my body was like, whoa, there's something wrong here. We need to fix this. I didn't want to go diving into all of the reasons why that was bad. Um, so that's the only um, tip in that regard that I'll share, is that the body needs sleep to heal and repair tissues, and that when we don't get the sleep that we need, it has an effect on our hunger and on our body's response to storing the energy that we have. So the body will store more fat when you're not sleeping well. This does depend on the person, though. Some people, I see that with some people not sleeping, they gain some weight, and with other people not sleeping, they become almost more thin. But I see that as more that depending on the person's metabolism, some people just don't naturally gain weight, but what happens to them is they will lose their muscle mass. And so if you measure them, um, there's those scales that measure the water in the body, the fat, the muscle. You'll see the same kind of proportions that I don't really like this term, but some people use the word skinny fat, that you have the same proportions. It's just that your muscles are much smaller compared to the amount of fat in the body. So the great news about that is that you can overcome sleep problems, and all of these things will sort themselves out. So on one hand, you can do things using your mindset and your motivation, as Johnny focuses on, to work out even though you don't want to work out, to make that healthy choice even when you're like craving chocolate ice cream, and you're like, no, you know what, I'm going to eat this banana with some cocoa powder, maybe put some almond butter on it. That will also be delicious and satisfying, but I feel better about that choice. And we use our mindset and some education around nutrition and exercise science in those moments, but then also learning about sleep and getting some professional assistance with your sleep makes those things easier. So we can come at it from two perspectives, and then you can regain control of your sleep. And when that's not such a mystery, then stress around sleep isn't so prominent as well.
That's a that's a great overview in terms of some of the physical sides, and getting some of the chemicals that affect the hormones that are affected in there. And he talks about the leptin and that being affected, and this can lower down. Again, as you sort of touched on, I guess our body sort of like varies from human to human, but there are kind of like a variety of things found in the long term. I mean, I've heard obviously stories of the severe case when someone's working like, I don't know, 18, 19-hour days, and then suddenly their health gets really, really bad, and they're getting things like you said, they're not feeling so good because of the fact they've got such a lack of sleep, and that's caused all those physiological effects. But obviously, as you're saying, it's good to be self-aware, and then listen to your body. And I'm always on about this podcast, making your self-esteem and self-care is obviously a huge part of that, and your self-awareness a priority, because you're going to get the most benefit when you feel on top, really. So it's really useful to understand the kind of the physical side of that. Kind of you've kind of gone over it a little bit, and with your early story earlier, with your kind of memory sort of blanks you were talking about in the hotel and checking on the bookings, but perhaps a few of the kind of the mental side of having a lack of sleep. Could you just give like a few kind of examples of some of the problems people might experience from that?
Yes. When we don't get the sleep that our body wants, or the ideal amount of sleep, it does have an effect on not only memory, but mood and also self-talk. So there is a direct correlation between lower sleep and lower mood and more negative self-talk or more negative thoughts. And this is where the sleep issue snowballs into its own issue. So often there's one trigger, for instance, a stressful event, or for some of my clients, a physical injury like a shoulder injury or something painful that prevented them from sleeping for a period of time. But then when the stressful event is no longer stressful, or when the shoulder heals and is no longer painful, you still have the sleep problem, because the sleep problem continues based on the fact that the the minimal sleep that you were getting was having an impact on your mood, on your thoughts, on your self-talk, on your motivation to do your self-care, your motivation to exercise, your food cravings. So essentially this lack of sleep over a short period of time affected almost all other parts of your life. And now that maybe you're not exercising as much as you used to, you're not eating as well as you used to, and now you're having a lot of anxiety around sleep and negative self-talk around your sleep. Now those things are keeping your sleep in a bad place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And the self-talk, particularly really useful for kind of my kind of area as well. Obviously, when you start talking to yourself negatively, that's where I want to try and avoid people going down, and we want to bring them to kind of this more positive view of themselves. But I guess what you're kind of describing is it's going to be even more challenging to do that with a lack of sleep. And now you kind of mentioned it, when I've even, earlier this year when I had an accident, actually, when I was kind of getting 5 or 6 hours of sleep, I remember just thinking, oh, this is really difficult. Life's quite challenging at the moment. We all have ups and downs, but it was kind of when I was getting that 5 or 6 hours of sleep, as opposed to I'm good, by the way, Lauren. I got 8 hours sleep last night, and I'm tending to get minimum of 7. So yeah, I tend to get 7 to 8 hours sleep. So I'm usually pretty good. So I know it varies from person to person, but yeah, I can totally relate to what you say about the self-talk. It's really interesting what I just picked up on what you said about someone has a temporary injury, for example, like a shoulder injury was your example there. And actually perhaps they might not have had so much of a sleep issue before, but because that's keeping them awake, whether they're on painkillers or not, or it's just too painful to sleep through, that's affecting it. So that's a really interesting point to make as well. So yeah, that makes sense. And I suppose there's quite a few, but it just makes, when you get sleep, I suppose for me personally, it makes me find the day a lot easier. And then other people have said similar as well. Talking about lengths of sleep then, would you say there's a particular duration you think people need to get, or does it really vary from person to person?
In my experience, most people need 7.5 to 8.5, but there is a healthy range of sleep where there are some people who are healthy and feel healthy anywhere between 6 to 9 hours. But I'd say the people who feel great on 6 hours or 9 hours, there's not nearly as many of those people as people who feel better between the 7.5, 8.5. And the amount of sleep that you need also would vary from day to day. For instance, on the weekend, I went on a really, really long hike through a river with some friends, and we hiked all day in a rushing river. And at the end of that day, I was exhausted. Plus, I'd been outside in nature all day, which typically gives you a better sleep at night. But just the
Mm.
also before I did that, I did a workout on my
Oh,
own because I didn't
blimey.
I didn't know that I was going to go do that with friends. It was kind of spontaneous. So then I had a great sleep that night, and I slept a little bit longer than I normally would just from all the exertion. Whereas on a different day, if I'm sitting most of the day, or if I'm, having a lazy day, I can anticipate from what I know about myself and what I know about my sleep that I probably don't need as much sleep that night as a day where I've exerted a lot of energy.
Can totally relate. I remember going to Los Angeles, I think it was a couple of years ago. I do love going over to the States, but was over in Los Angeles and went for a Hollywood hike. And I think we were walking for about 6 hours. And I'm usually not sleeping more than like 8.5 hours. And I think I slept for about 12 hours. That me and my mate were like asleep for about 12 hours. So that must be the crazy one. Not used to walking that far, certainly. So yeah, no, it's interesting because I hear different kind of perspectives on kind of like sleep. You hear someone like Tony Robbins got a really low amount, and you don't know how true that is. And then some people tend to get that
Yeah.
amount. I've heard the odd friend who's got a real lack. My best mate, for example, he says he needs 8.5, but I've got another friend who says, "Oh, we're all right on 6." But yeah, I suppose kind of it tends to be between 7.5 to 8.5. I certainly feel that for myself is the benefit anyway.
I find some of the people who say that they feel good on 6 hours of sleep, when I ask them more, what I discover is that they're sleeping for 6 hours during their work week, and then they're sleeping like 9 hours on the weekend. They're trying to catch up. But your body cannot catch up on all of the benefits of sleep. You can catch up a little bit with your deep sleep and with your REM sleep, but skipping 5 nights of, cutting your sleep 2 hours short, 5 nights every week, and then trying to catch up on the weekend, over time, I don't think that's the best preventative health approach.
I
For
like
for
that.
me, if I'm trying to look at how healthy do I want to be, when I'm retired in my 70s, if I live into my 80s, how do I want to feel? And I'm trying to set myself up for the best long-term health. I don't think that trying to give yourself short sleeps during the week and then trying to catch up on the weekend is the best long-term health plan. But what we're often doing is we're looking at our short-term health, and we're saying, my goal right now is to make money so that I can retire and whatever. And some people have that a little bit of a "I'll sleep when I'm dead" kind of attitude. And sometimes for a short period of time, you do that and don't worry about it. But for a long period of time, what I see is that can trigger insomnia if you're purposely not sleeping enough multiple days per week and then trying to catch up on the weekends. Because one thing that you're doing is giving your body a type of jet lag. So every Monday, when you try to go back to your short sleep, that's going to be a struggle, especially if on Saturday morning and Sunday morning you got up much later and you got more sleep. It's going to be hard to get the quality sleep that you want, even if you think, oh, I'll feel good if I have 5 hours of or 6 hours of quality sleep on Monday night. But it might be hard for you to get that quality sleep on Monday night because you're shifting your sleep pattern so much from one day to another. And that's where playing with your sleep can be a little bit tricky. And I would do that with caution, and I wouldn't purposely do that for a long period of time.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. Sometimes, yeah, people like going short term and then suddenly getting longer sleep. So yeah, it's good to for my own self. I think it's good for good consistency of sort of similar time most nights. It gets a little bit tricky where, well, it's all right at the moment because I'm sort of like, you have to go home from the bar at 10, but it gets a bit, it gets a bit trickier from past experiences when I get home from the bar at 2 in the morning. But yeah, no, I totally agree, but you can definitely feel it from that. So we've talked a little bit about, we've talked a bit about kind of, well, a lot about the physical side of what can happen potentially from a lack of sleep, and then the mental side of things. I mean, you talked about your own memory struggle. We talked about sort of the negative self-talk, and obviously that's really useful to kind of listeners listening about self-esteem and your confidence, and then kind of getting those down moods and things like that. If you were to give like your top, let's say, five kind of tips on getting or preparing yourself for a good quality sleep, what would you say?
I would approach it from doing anything that brings your life closer to nature will be the way to better sleep. So, spending more time outside, getting more sunlight in your eyes during the day, being in more darkness and dim orange quality of light at nighttime. So our modern lifestyle has really removed us from nature's natural rhythm, and I see that as one of the biggest challenges on our sleep. It's just that our lifestyle completely goes against it. The amount of movement that we get too, I believe there are people who I start seeing them and they're like, my exercise is good. I work out however many times a week. But when we really look at how much movement is best for that person, often that individual needs more movement than a few hours per week. And that's because we're animals. We're not meant to be sitting in a chair at a computer all day long. If you think even a few generations ago, you would have to grow most of your own food, and all of the labor that would go into that, and most things you'd have to make them, not buy them, or at least go to a store. Now we just order things on the internet.
Just done mine
um,
today.
yeah, right. Yeah. So the more that our lifestyle gets further from nature in terms of movement, light, even temperature, nature creates that temperature at night, which is lower than during the day, because that's what the body needs to have a good sleep, is a little bit lower temperature at night as well. So Mother Nature is, like I said, she's smarter than we are. She's way smarter than we are. And she's given us all of the things that we need to have a good sleep. She also emits negative ions, which helps with mental health. There's so much healing that happens when you spend time in nature versus spending time on technology or in a car or in a city. So the closer to nature you can get, the more rejuvenated you'll feel and the better sleep that you'll get. And if you think about yourself like a little kid or like a doggy or something, when you have kids or when you're training a dog and you want your kids to have a good sleep that night, what do? You bring them to the park, you make them play some kind of game, you play frisbee, you bring the soccer ball or the beach ball, and you tire them out and you make them go outside and run around and scream and laugh and have fun so that they're going to have a good sleep that night. But then what do you do for yourself to have a good sleep? Instead, you often we'll work at the computer, we'll do all those things that we have to do, we'll feel like we're too busy to go outside or to do exercise or to eat well. And then we think that we can, using our minds, think ourselves into a good sleep. But with sleep, it's really body over the mind. You can't think yourself into sleeping. What you can do with the mind is understand your sleep and think more realistically about your sleep rather than thinking negatively about it. But it's really the hormones that help you sleep build up in the body through being in light during the day and getting movement during the day.
Yeah. So what I'm kind of picking up from that was more trying to be more natural, like we're meant to be as human beings. Like this is more than a few generations ago, but like the kind of caveman days, when they would basically, hunt in the day and then sleep at night, or even as you said a few generations ago, picking up like planting and farming and things like that, being out for the day. Whilst now we've got like these phones as technology to, especially during COVID times and the pandemic, where we're kind of like stuck in the inside anyway. So yeah, that definitely sounds right. And you've kind of made me myself, and hopefully somebody listeners might be able to relate to this as well, and kind of think, oh, I need to go out for some more walks in the day as well as going to the gym. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's definitely useful advice. So thanks for that, Lauren. Just before kind of as we're sort of like wrapping up, I just wanted to touch briefly. And you sort of okay for just 5-10 minutes more? I know you've got something else.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So just like obviously you've got clearly really value your input and knowledge into this area, and I've written down so many notes and I'm gonna have to rewrite it because I can never read my own notes anyway. But you've obviously got this. You've learned a lot from your own experience and studying this. Just in terms of your coaching, just briefly, how do you kind of work with clients to help them benefit and improve the quality of their sleep?
hmm the approach that I take combines coaching, which is basically a thinking partner to help you come up with your own solutions to problems so that those
Yeah,
solutions are
totally.
the most meaningful for you. Combining that with education and with holding the person accountable for making the changes that they need to make, and stress reduction techniques, and tools for overcoming that negative self-talk. So there's a big component of cognitive behavioral therapy in what I do. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia is its own beast, a little bit slightly different from regular cognitive behavioral therapy, where it includes collecting information. So there is a type of journaling and tracking that I do with my clients over the entire program. And with this information collection, we can use that to reflect back on what's working and what's not working, and finding cause and effect, rather than only deciding in yourself what's working and not working. Because sometimes we think that something we're doing is not having an effect on our sleep, but then when you track it, you realize that it is. Um, and there's that saying that anything recorded or anything that's tracked will improve, but anything that's tracked and recorded will improve exponentially. So we use this information to help the person grow exponentially. And it's not only for me to guide them, but it's also for them to learn from their own experience. So yeah, those would be the main approaches. And we work together over a set period of time, which can be extended if needed. But I don't do the one-off appointments anymore, just because I've seen I can add so much more value when we spend more time together. We're able
Mm.
to go deeper into some of the real reasons behind someone's stress and anxiety, because sometimes the real reason why someone isn't sleeping isn't what they thought it was. Like, yes, you can still improve your sleep through light therapy, through all of the sleep education and kind of that sleep hygiene that will help. But if there's a deeper emotional either trauma or stressor or unhappiness that's showing up, and that could also contribute to somebody not sleeping. So we want to make sure that we're spending enough time together and building that trust to go deep into the real reasons why someone's not sleeping.
Absolutely. It sounds similar to sort of my coaching practice in the way that it's not overnight I didn't even mean to do that when I said overnight.
It's a good one.
Yeah, that was not unintentional, everyone, although sometimes we jokes on that thing. It's not like a quick fix, I should say. It's obviously a over a period of time. So whether you're looking at mindset, whether you look at your self-esteem and confidence like me, or whether you're looking at Lauren, who obviously also looks into the psychology as well as the physiology of things, it's not going to be an overnight fix. So yeah, I can totally understand and relate to what you're saying about it being a period of time to get the best and improving along the way. And it's great the kind of the tracking and recording method. I love that. So sounds like a great area. And I must admit, before I met you, I didn't really come across any sleep coaches. So I was fascinated by the area. So it was great to kind of get in touch with you and then learn a little bit from you. So yeah, definitely. I'm sure this has been a really valuable lesson for everyone else as well. And I was very keen to get sleep combined into the self-esteem and confidence mindset, because it's just one of the many factors, but a very, very important factor into your self-esteem and confidence as part of your self-care. So it's about being self-aware of what's causing your your sleep issues, and and then using some of what Lauren's talked about today. But thank you very much, Lauren. Just before we do finally wrap up, obviously you've given us a lot of information today, but if listeners want to find some more information about you or learn some more about your sleeping coaching, or just kind of your insights into sleep in general, where can they find you?
I have a website, which is www.coachingforinsomniacs.com. So there's an S at the end of that, coachingforinsomniacs.com. And you can find me on Instagram under the same, and Facebook under the same as well. I'm most active on Instagram, or I have the most active audience on Instagram at the moment. So if you can find me there, that would be great. And if you were interested in, if anyone's interested in having a one-on-one complimentary session with me, then they can message me either through my website or through Instagram or Facebook messaging, and we can set up a time. I always offer a 45-minute chat about their sleep to see what they're hoping to resolve and if they're ready to make changes, and offer any value that I can offer in that time.
Sounds like a great opportunity. So brilliant. Thanks, Lauren. What we'll do is we'll also, I'm going to put this in the description for the episode as well. So for you listening today, you can find Lauren's details in there as well. So yeah, I'll just touch base with you, Lauren, and put that in the description as well. So thanks very much for being with us today, Lauren. I know you're sort of coming up to 1, 2 o'clock, whilst I'm coming up to 9 o'clock, and I've not had food yet. But
Oh,
yeah. So anyway, I hope you have a great rest of the day, and thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast.
thank you so much, Johnny. It was a pleasure. And thank you to anyone listening. I hope that you enjoyed it and learned something new. And Johnny, you go get yourself some healthy dinner and some self-care now that your workday is done.
Yeah, get the 8 hours sleep. Thank you, Lauren. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.